Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. I'm Nathan Taylor, happy to jump in with you here today. This is our fourth episode in a series around email security technologies. We're going to get a little nerdy today, so a little bit of a nerd alert, but I won't go too deep. Want to keep it shortish, and there's a lot of really good articles on the Microsoft site about some of the stuff we're talking about here, but I want to talk about some exciting new technologies Microsoft is adding to their email configuration that I think are worth really starting to dig into to stay ahead of the curve. So excited to dig into this with you today. Here at the Demystifying Microsoft podcast, our goal is just to help you stay ahead of all the rapid changes in the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft's dropping new updates on licensing and technology and features, sometimes on a weekly basis. And we want to be your source for all the information to keep you ahead of that learning curve. Feel free, please like, subscribe, share on all the channels. Sourcepass, Microsoft Center of Excellence is where you can find us. And we really appreciate you guys joining us here today. So let's jump in today. We've talked over the last few weeks about how a lot of email filtering and email security now comes down to being able to properly authenticate email. And that really applies on inbound and outbound. And so today we're going to talk about some technologies that tie into those equations and allow you to kind of have a better posture on those fronts. And I want to go back to kind of the mindset here, though, which is, the problem with email has always been, when the technology was invented in the 80s and then updated to support encryption in the 90s, we're talking, 40-year-old technology. The idea of authenticated and encrypted and secured email was not the same level of requirement back then, and maybe wasn't on their radar. But now we live in a world where spam and phishing and spoofing and threat actors and social manipulation and those sorts of things are just a really common thing. We've got to be able to filter more cleanly what is legitimate email and what isn't. And last week we talked about some illustrations, whether it was that banker who learns to detect fake email, fake money by spending a lot of time with real money, starting to learn what it feels like, what it looks like. And when they come across something that's fake, oftentimes it's just really obvious to them. And I don't know if I use a phrase with email, the email just doesn't smell right. There's just something about it that just doesn't smell right. And that's your indicator that it's not an email you want to be, you can tell it's a phishing email. And as things are getting more advanced, as AI is improving the state of the art, I think you're finding more and more that some of those phishing emails and fake emails are higher quality, and it's less easy to pick out those details. The other kind of variables we talked about is helping the mail filters be the bouncer. They're at the door. They're looking at everybody coming through the door and saying, do you have an invitation? Are you on the list? Are you dressed right? Are you already inebriated? Do I want to let you into this club? You can apply the same thing to email, where our email filters are really the bouncer on that front. The other illustration I had on this front was the idea of your kids and how you filter for who can take care of your kids. You start to go through a risk matrix of, do I know them? Do I know their family? Do I have other people that can vouch for them? Who am I going to have be a babysitter? If it's, what's their age? What's their gender? Do they seem like they're inebriated? Do they seem like they're trustworthy? Do they come with recommendations? Do they have CPR training? All these variables are things we do every day in our world where we just filter through how to risk assess things. And in email, it's the same thing. Your email filters are getting email in, and they're going through the checklist of things we've covered in previous episodes. Is the sender on the SPF list? Is it approved sender for this sending domain? Is the email signed by DKIM, and does the signature match? Does DMARC say that they actually have their DKIM and their SPF dialed in, and I should reject them if it doesn't match, so they're confident they can match it? Did the email come in over an encrypted connection, over TLS? Is it from a mail server that I trust, or a mail server that's on a blacklist? Does the email trigger any of my filters? Are there any dangerous keywords, or are there any heuristics, or, as we're running on Defender for Office 365, is the AI sensing a pattern in there that's a common pattern in business email compromise or phishing emails? It goes through this whole list. And so we've talked previously how important it is to get your DKIM, SPF, and DMARC dialed in. Important to get your Defender for Office 365 dialed in. We've talked about how it's important that we really start to eliminate the MX-based email filters in front of Office 365. Use Defender for Office 365 and maybe an API-based mail filter. Don't run your mail through somebody else's servers first. It'll cause you issues. So today we're going to talk even deeper about the newer technologies, and these are all around really enforcing secure email transport. The way email has worked for most of the last 40 years is, and maybe the last 30 since SMT Start TLS was enabled, which would allow you to send encrypted email, and this is encrypted in transit. It used to be that you would go hit a email server and it would say, would you like to send it encrypted? And you could say yes or no. If you said yes, then the servers would negotiate an encryption method and send the email through an encrypted connection. And so that meant that as those ones and zeros flew across the internet, people observing those ones and zeros flying by couldn't easily understand what was happening because it's encrypted. The challenge always was you could just say, no, I want it unencrypted, and it would downgrade it to being non-encrypted. It would send it plain text. Well, in a world of compliance requirements and HIPAA and privacy and security, we'd rather send things encrypted. And in Microsoft 365, you can actually send a rule that says, hey, outbound, all my email outbound needs to go encrypted. If the receiving source doesn't approve encrypted email, then don't send it. And I've done that for a number of customers, and most of the time your outbound email is going to flow just fine. 99% of the email servers in the world are going to accept encrypted email. And if they aren't, then you probably don't want to be sending it. Somebody's running something that's not set up properly, and you don't want to send them email. Inbound, it's a little harder. There's a lot more mail coming in that's not encrypted, and a lot of that's because of spam and phishing and there's a lot more noise inbound, and so it's harder to enforce it. But Microsoft is starting to build out some technologies that allow them to enforce email encryption and start to define that for your company. And so there's a couple technologies here we're going to talk about. But first we're going to talk about is MTA STS. It's a mouthful. Again, nerd alert, we're going to get deeper here. That stands for Mail Transfer Agent Strict Transport Security. And this is an email standard that allows domain owners to enforce TLS encryption for SMTP connections between mail servers. So it allows you to ensure you have secure email transmission by preventing downgrade and man-in-the-middle attacks for the SMTP traffic. In other words, you're saying, it doesn't matter what happens between me and you, you're not allowed to accept email from me unless it is encrypted. And so it forces the server on the other end to know that email from you is required to be encrypted with a valid TLS connection. And if it doesn't, then fail it and don't accept that email. So it's a way for you to really enforce your email security. This is all managed through a single DNS text record. And so you create a _mta-sts.domain.com text record. Again, it's always DNS. We'll go back to that. And it'll let you set a policy on this front. That then lets you there's all kinds of rules about the syntax. You kind of say, these are the rules for how I want to send these secure emails. And Microsoft has started rolling out support for this. And so it's available for you to enable on your tenant now. So it's a newer technology. And so it's not just Microsoft's technology. It is actually an industry standard. And so Microsoft allows you to enable this. And outbound emails are capable of being sent that way currently. And you can go ahead and create your policies. In order to do inbound policies, I think you have to move to the new Microsoft MX records as well. And they do also call out that you can't use an MX record-based mail filter. So that's important to go run through. There is some requirements for how you build out the syntax of this, and there's some tools online that can help you drive that. And you can also do it on a number of other tools. We also use EasyDMark because I can give you reporting on some of this. But a lot of the reporting actually relies on the second technology we're going to talk about today, which is TLS RPT. And TLS RPT is a reporting tool, stands for SMTP TLS, which is Transport Layer Security Reporting. TLS is the name of the encryption that's used for most websites and email flow. It's the encryption algorithm or standard for how we send secure content back and forth. The current version is TLS 1.3. And TLS-RPT or TLS reporting is a reporting mechanism that lets domain owners receive reports about email delivery issues related to MTS, STS, MTA, STS, and start TLS failures. So it allows you to define where you'd like the reporting to go when MTA, STS fails. So as a domain owner, you can say, hey, I'd like to start using MTA, STS, which is telling people that my outbound email is going to be sent securely. And so you should trust it if it comes encrypted and you trust the SMTP connection and it comes securely, then you know it's from me. And if that fails, if you get an email from me that doesn't pass that, I'd like you to send reporting to my service. It sends a JSON report that includes details about delivery attempts, failures, why they failed, that sort of thing. We prefer using a tool like EasyDMark for that reporting. And the great thing is it really gives you a lot more detail about what's going on with your email on the outbound perspective. And what I really like about using a tool like EasyDMark with your DMARC reporting and your TLS RPT reporting is you start to get a lot of really good data about where your email is failing. Are you sending through multiple services? Where is it failing? Where isn't it failing? And that can be really helpful for the IT department because there are times that email failure is kind of a mystery. We don't always know. We hear that somebody's not getting our email. We have to kind of dig for details. The more reporting we can build in with the TLS RPT reporting and the DMARC reporting that EasyDMARC and other tools like it support, it really allows us to drive better reporting, allow you to troubleshoot any email flow issues you have. And in this case, it'll also give you additional data about your MTA STS deployment. Is your email flowing properly and getting secured? Because it's something you want to be careful with. With MTA-STS, we can set levels of enforcement. So we don't have to go immediately to, hey, if it's not encrypted, don't accept it. We can go in kind of a reporting mode and make sure that we have it dialed in before we dial in the reporting, very similar to how we do that with DMARC. And so you really want that reporting to understand, if I turn on MTA-STS enforcement, how am I going to break something? Is that going to break my MailChimp email? Or do I have a scenario where I'm sending email that's not compliant and nobody will be able to receive those emails after I set this flag? So it's really important that you go ahead and build out the reporting at the same time. A third tool that kind of ties in and brings these two together, and it's also a DNS record. All three of these rely on DNS, and that is DANE for DNSSEC. So DANE is DNS-based authentication of name entries. So we talked about DNSSEC earlier. DNSSEC is where you take your domain name records for your business and for your company domain, and you go to your registrar and your name servers and you turn on DNS security. And what that does is it tells that server to publish some records that say, hey, for DNS records from this domain, I am not only the domain name manager, but I will sign those records. So if you get a record about my domain, you can go check to see if they're valid based on the cryptographic signature. Really important thing for us to start doing. Wasn't really available or required 5 years ago, but now it's becoming really critical to get it done. Pretty easy to set up on a Cloudflare or GoDaddy. It's a checkbox, sometimes a small fee, but it's a really valuable thing. It makes your domain more secure, and it allows variables to be put in place around things like MTA-STS, because DANE, DNS-based authentication of named entries, adds a layer on top of MTA-STS where those emails and those TLS encryptions, you can now make sure that the TLS encryption uses a validated and signed TLS certificate. So you're not only making the email encrypted, you're not only making sure it's valid encryption, but then you're validating who can encrypt your email. These are the trusted certificates for my email flow by binding those to the domain names and using the certificate authority ecosystem to validate them. Pretty easy to build out the DNS sec. You need to make sure you have a couple records published, and you need to have DNSSEC enabled on your domain. And this gives you some real great, another layer of just confidence and security on your domain. Now, one of the things required for this, in order for this to work on the inbound, as opposed to outbound, so for people emailing you, is that Microsoft's default mail servers they've been using for the last 12 years on Microsoft 365 are on the protection.outlook.com domain. So if you've ever set up Microsoft, when you go set up the MX record, you're setting up your domain.protection.outlook.com. Microsoft is slowly deprecating those and is coming out with a new set of domain names that are mx.microsoft. There's no .com. The top level domain in these new MX records is .microsoft, mx.microsoft. So you have your domain -com, a randomized letter number string .mx.microsoft.com, and we can walk you through getting that enabled. You got to run a PowerShell command. Microsoft will spit out your new MX record. You go publish that on your DNS records. And once you turn that on, it enables people to send you email over MTSTS and to do DANE, where you can then validate inbound email. Outbound's been working for a while. Microsoft enabled that previously. And another common ask on this big MX record change, it's kind of a big change in the Microsoft world. Those MX records haven't changed for a dozen years. So far, it looks like there is no impact to your SPF records. Your SPF records can stay on the protection.outlook.com for now. We'll see if Microsoft changes that over time, but right now, the only thing that's changing is the inbound MX record. But there's a lot of value in going through this process to get all these technologies working, because what you're doing is you're making sure that the mail you're sending is validated at 3 or 4 different levels, which could be really valuable for the receiving servers, because they start to really be able to say, man, I know when I run into email from that person, that domain, it's aligned across SPF, DKIM, DMARC, at TLS, MTSTS. I can validate it 3 ways to Sunday. I really trust it. And then anytime anybody tries to spoof you or pretend to be you, that's going to fail even stronger, because the servers do build up a reputation on your email. And so it allows the servers that are paying attention to really know that email from you is incredibly trustworthy. An email that's failing any of those things is not trustworthy and not to trust it. On the flip side, when you change your MX record so that you're using the mx.microsoft, it allows you to receive email with that higher level of security as well. So you can start to see the valid senders with additional data. So those who have done the work to turn on DNSSEC, enable MTASDS and TLS-RPT, they have DANE enabled. You'll be able to, your server will be able to see that same data, and we'll be able to validate legitimate mail even better. And it's kind of one of those rising tides raises all ships. If we all start to embrace these more advanced email authentication methods, it really starts to build out our ability to have more trustworthy, more secure email, which is a critical thing, because we're in a world where email is becoming harder and harder to authenticate. Is this spoofed? Is this phishing? Is this legit? And the more we can make the barrier of entry to verified and legitimate email higher, and the more that becomes the standard, then the harder it is for the threat actors to pretend to be us, to sneak in. They go build a new domain and try to turn all this on, and it starts to be where you just don't trust it. It's like when you get a phone call from a scammer. You answer the phone, the first indicator that it's a scammer is the pause while it goes and finds somebody in the data center to talk. The next issue is there's just an accent issue. Quickly through your own heuristics, your brain's ability to filter when you're getting a scam phone call. We're trying to build that same functionality across email, where legitimate emails are just so clearly legitimate that illegitimate emails that are not going through these same levels of attestation are really clear. And then if you do ever get a sophisticated IT attack where somebody's really trying to mess with your email in transit, they're trying to mess with your legitimate email, either inbound or outbound. Some of these technologies around MTASTS and DANE and TLS reporting really give you a chance to not only see when that's happening, but to identify it, because that message has been modified. I can see where it's not from the person that says it is. It's not with a valid TLS domain. Somebody built a mail server to pretend to be me, but they aren't aligned with my DNSSEC. Dane doesn't pass. They don't have MTSTS. Maybe it's aligned SPF and DKIM. They found a way through that, but the other 3 or 4 layers they didn't get aligned. So again, this is super nerdy, super kind of cutting edge technology, but it's also really fun. It's really cool to get into these newer technologies and learn about the new things that are being built. Like I said, we'd love to help you with this. If you want to get this deployed on your tenant, we have projects where we can jump in and build out these technologies for you, help you get them going, get you going with a reporting tool like EasyDMark so you can see the data, help you with Defender for Office 365 tuning so you get that higher level security. We can help you navigate pulling your MX-based filter out of the loop. You still use it, just use it over the API method, or we can show you some alternatives if you're not happy with that tool. We can do some security awareness training, which is the next piece. How do we train our users to navigate the data we're now presenting for them? We can help you turn on some of the flags in Outlook where it starts to flag email that is failing all these capabilities. So reach out to our team, sourcepassmcoe.com, hit the contact us button and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about email security, about MTSTS, or I saw your podcast on my email security and love to jump in. We'd love to sit down, talk with you about what you got going on and see if we can solve some issues for you and have some fun, man. This is really exciting, fun stuff. I enjoy being on the cutting edge of technology and implementing new technology, and it makes your email domain through Microsoft super cool. Who else is using mx.microsoft? You're on the cutting edge, which is awesome. So thank you for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun chatting through this topic. This is week 4. We're going to move on to the next topic. Next week, we are going to jump into a conversation around Azure cost management. We're getting a lot of inquiries about how do I manage my costs in Azure. That'll probably be a 3 or 4 week session as we just talk through the various levers we can pull to dial in your cost in Azure. Looking forward to chatting with you on that. Look us up on sourcepassmcoe.com. We've got a LinkedIn, YouTube page. Like, subscribe, share. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Demystifying Microsoft podcast episode, where we try to help you navigate the crazy world of the Microsoft ecosystem. I've been your host, Nathan Taylor. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy Friday, and we'll talk to you in the next one. Thanks.